So in preparation for the wiring now, put all the sensors in and all the wiring I can find. So when we put the knock sensors in, I've now connected each one up, and we've got the looms there ready to go back into the ECU, and the ECU looms to come out this way as well. And I've built up the rad now with the fan on there as well, so we can run the fan wiring back into the ECU as well. And we've got to add little things like, I really like the original engine bay light, so I'm going to put that back in. So we need to make sure we've got a power wire to that. And then I'm going to make a decision on the battery, whether I keep it there in the original position by the exhaust manifold, or maybe relocate it in the boot and keep the engine bay nice and clean. So a few little things I've got to think through. What I'm doing at the moment is taking all the original wires and labeling everything. So I've got a brake switch there, I've got indicators, I've got my ignition lock, my wiper controls, and so on. I'm just going through everything I can find with all my gauges that are going to go in the car, so we make sure we've got the wires fed to those. So I've got Jake here from Racing Lines, who's come in specially to help make all the lines for the Datsun. That one being crimped there is our brake line for the front. So that'll go from this wheel up across the tunnel over to you. So that brake line's connecting to our T, which then runs up to the servo for the front brakes. Right, the next bit we're doing, Jake's making up the fuel line, so we just fitted the fuel pump in there temporarily. So the line will go from there to the fuel tank, so that's our feed in. And then we'll run a line from there going all the way to the front into a filter on the bulkhead. And that'll be our fuel out. So Jake's going to put a banjo on the end of the pump on that side, and then we can run it all the way under the car. We've got our fuel coming from the tank in the dash 6 line going into the fuel pump, and then we've just made that line which will go from the fuel pump all the way to the front to our filter. The next line we've got to make is a return, and the return is in that small pipe up there. There's only a 4mm pipe, so the way Jake's going to do that is to use a dash 4 pipe and then connect it in a straight connector to a dash 6 back all the way to the regulator of the car.
So I've got a machine, one of these cones, which the only cone that we keep for a brake line is a 37 degree, which is to suit the JIC threads, whereas a metric fitting uses like a 45 degree cone. So I have to machine that because it's concave, so it's a little bit specific to what we're doing on this car rather than an off-the-shelf part.
So now we've got most of the engine wiring sort of lined up, not complete, but a lot of the connections are done. I think I'll start on the front engine bay, but I thought what I'll do, if I start by stripping all this loom out, cut everything out and thin it out so I've just got the bits I need, and we'll look at the condition. If it's usable, if it's tidy, maybe I'll just reuse this and then we can continue it inside the car. What I've decided to do is actually take out the wiring for the back of the car, because originally it ran all the way down across there, across the floor, and it ended up on the right hand side. So then I thought, how about I just take it out and turn it around and run it on the left of the car, and then my connection will just plug in and I can alter things here. So on a simple wire, we often use these pre-soldered connectors. I'll show you how they work. So you just put in one end to one side, get the other side in as well. First us. So you heat up the center bit, the solder, all done. So one way of feeding a loom, which through a tight space, is running a wire. So I've got to now attach the loom to it. So I'm just gradually try and get this fed through. So on this end I've taped the harness and I can start feeding it in. On these older cars there's always not much space to work. That feels comfortable. So there's my loom for the back, and I can start to spread it out. So there we go. I've got my 2 sections of harness here, and I can take off my my feeding harness there, which I don't need anymore. From here I've got one loom, separate that, which is going to go up into the roof. Has to go up that way. I've got the dash harness here complete. This is what I've stripped out the dashboard. So I've got that there. That's going to go to my steering side. And here I can start with the first connection, which is my rear wiring that I've just put in. So I'll put that in, and start just to connect the steering up so we see where we end up with all these connections. So here I've got the original harness spun round, so we'll leave that there. And here they are, so ignition lock will go on the back there. And then I've got lights, wiper controls, so for example that one can go back in. Just laying out the wiring now, running it through the opening there over to the front, and then we'll run it in the car, and these are my connectors that are going to go back inside the bulkhead. So here I'm going to run, so what I've got is my headlight wire and my indicator wire, so I'll leave them here for this side. So they're quite long wires that come through anyway, and then as I go along I'll build all this up together. So they're my indicators and headlights for the left side of the car, and I'll just run this wire through the same hole so all the wiring can go in. We can insulate it and put the shroud over it. So this side's pretty much good to go at the front. The one wire I need to run is for the rad fan, so like I've done with the yellow one, I'll put another heavier wire for the fan and get that built into this loom and put it all through. And so you can see that down there. I've got two wires, one will be earth and one will be alive, and that will be switched through the fan switch, which we're going to have up here, and that will go on the inlet manifold, so we've already allowed for that. So we've got a temperature switch for the gauge, and we'll have a fan switch, and that will trigger the fan as soon as it gets up to the temperature we tell it we want it to kick in on. Just tape my loom together, so it will be extra wire for the horn and the black one for the rad fan, so that's all coming up here nice and tidy. And I've got one little loom offshoot there which is for my wiper motor, and I've just put the wiper motor in place in the middle there, and I've got the plug coming out here. So what I will do now is drill a hole in the bulkhead, and that wire will then come through there. And I found there's a cavity which runs all the way from the top there all the way down to here, out that opening there. So I'm going to run all the wiring through there and then back out down the front, and that way the wiring is going to be hidden. This one's from a Nissan Skyline, it's perfect. What I'll do is run one at the front of the engine here, and then I'll run one near the starter to get some good earthing points. To get all my lines perfectly correct, I'm going to fit the front valance on first, and then get the wings on, bolted together so all my lines are perfect before I drill out each hole. Otherwise, if I mess it up, those gaps aren't going to be right, the lines aren't going to be flowing, it just won't be perfect, so I better do it right. Try and keep it central, so I've got the same distance on the front wings there, and then I can work backwards from there really. As far as fiberglass kits go, it's actually pretty good. It's a really strong material, and it's built really well, and the fitting's pretty good. So let's tighten these up. That's pretty good, that's fitting up nice there. It's nice and tight up against there. The one thing I'm going to make afterwards is here in the center there's a support, and I'll make a fixing there to keep it secure, but already it's really quite solid. So the reason why I fitted the front valance on first, so I've got my lines nice and straight, it's nice and solid, and I'll make sure that the wing sits perfect here so these curves match, and then this face here, if it's not spot on, it's never going to look nice. So this is now secure. I'm going to bolt the wing to the valance and make that flush, and then make sure these curves match before I start drilling any of these holes, because if I put that wrong, there's a gap there or it sits out like that, it's going to look terrible. Rev nuts are done on this fender, so they've all gone in okay. They seem to be fine, so I can now mount the actual wing and see how it looks. So I'm going to use some of these Torx bolts, but when we finish the car and it comes back from paint, we'll put some brand new ones in. So for now I'm going to test fit the wing again. Not all my threads are done, so let's put a couple of bolts in, and when it comes back from paint we'll put some more brand new shiny ones in. I'd rather get all the drilling and all the That's going to work out of the way, so we don't do anything like that when it's back from paint. It's all clean work. The ones I've got here are a bit too short, so I'll get some longer ones for those. These ones should be okay. Yep. Let's try that one there. Alright, so that's a pretty good first fit. The edges are really nice and clean. I'm hoping I can get away without having to put a rubber seal along here. But I think before it's painted, we might just sand a little bit. So there's tiny little gap there, let's say. If we sand a little bit in the corner, maybe there, we can get it to just sit a little bit tighter and then get away without a seal.